I was one of the editors.
Oh!
Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'll turn it over to Hannah, and she'll talk from here, but thank you.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much for coming. And this is a lovely venue. I haven't been here before. So I'm Hannah Means Shannon. I report and do a lot of different things for Bleeding Cool, which is a comics and film popular culture website, gossip and news. I was saying earlier that I'm one of a few female writers on the site, though perhaps people aren't aware of that, so it's something we're trying to raise more awareness there. But this event is hosted by So What Press, which is Dave Kelly here, and Lawrence Hall is here too. And thank you for putting this together, because they really did all the hard work to contact you all and to see if you'd be interested in doing this. So I'm just going to introduce everyone here for a second. So here we have Lawrence Hall. She is the producer, partner producer of Tales of the Night Watchman, and helps run So What Press, their own imprint. Fabulous that you were at SPX this year. We have Marguerite Dubai, is that correct? Yes. She's the producer of The Hookah Girl and Other True Stories. She hails from San Francisco, whereas Laura's from Wisconsin. Wow. Yeah. Fantastic. Sorry, I was just a little surprised for a second there. Here we have, down here we have Robin Ha. She is the producer of, she contributed to Women of Marvel and her comic The Dress. So she's originally from South Korea, yep. And had quite a migratory experience moving to Alabama, I believe, as a younger person. So she has a lot to say. But she's also a contributor to, is the Strumpet? Are you a contributor to Strumpet?
I was on the second one, and the third one that's coming up.
It's coming soon.
Actually, next Tuesday.
Everybody, a launch party for that. It's going to be a great event. I'm happy about that. We also have Hazel New Levin. Her book, If This Be Sin. And she hails from Portland, Oregon. She's at SVA, but she's almost done. Almost. And lastly, we have Molly. Sorry, I left you out there. Molly Astertag. She's the artist on Strong Female Protagonist. She also has her own webcomic and zine, a new one. What is the title again?
Journey to the Valley of Whispers.
Journey to the Valley of Whispers. Yeah, it's great. And she's also at SVA, and she's a senior as well. So this is quite a diverse group in terms of genre as well. I hope my questions are helpful. You know, the topic for this evening is the title is Secret Identities Can Be So Hard on the Eyes, Gender Identity in Genre Comics. And I think one of the principles behind this talk is to think about new questions and new ways of talking about gender in comics, because some of the old questions are getting tired, you know? I've been at panels where major people in the industry, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Becky Cloonan, have said, and Faith Erin Hicks has even said too, we love having these female-focused panels because it's getting our voice out there, it's making awareness prominent. But if we're on mixed panels and it's not the topic, the only question we ever get asked is about, what's it like being a woman in comics? So that must be a little grating. I'm assuming that, but of course, why don't we start with that? Is that grating? Or how do you feel about that being the question you get asked the most in comics?
Well, I'll go. Sure. Well, I mean, my work tends to be, I'm trying to think of the word, you know, like my work tends to be, I single myself out for this stuff, because The Hookah Girl is about, it's an autobiography about being an Arab in this country. So, in a way that I'm used to it, like I'm used to being like, what's it like being the Arab, and, you know, what's it like being the woman Arab in this, you know. So, for me, I'm sort of expecting it, but I can totally understand at the same time that's really annoying to have to just constantly having to, you know, deflect these kinds of questions. It's like, I mean, the difference being that I'm kind of going and expecting to be asked those kinds of questions, but just being, you know, just wanting to go out there and create your work, yeah, totally. So.
It's definitely a conflict because it makes you feel, I'm going to speak personally for a second and say it makes me feel like a terrible person when I get tired of being asked that, because I know it's a cause and I know it's something I need to be doing. But occasionally you want some variety in your discussion as well, and I think in your work as well. Does anyone else want to speak about being asked questions like that? How do you feel?
I kind of think that question is going to phase out. I think Hazel, the class that Hazel and I are in at SVA is majority women, I think. When I think of all my favorite artists in my class, almost all of them are women, so no one is here from SVA, so it's okay to say that. But like, I think it's like there's such a, like, and I think that the generation before us too, but I think there's so many female creators coming up that eventually it's going to be kind of silly to ask that, because it won't be 3 men and 1 woman on a panel. It'll be equal, I hope.
Yeah, I want to add that when I was growing up in Korea, I read mostly Korean and Japanese comics. And it was kind of weird the other way around. If I saw a man doing a girls comic, that was like, whoa, what? You know? But then it was kind of like given that they're equal or even more cartoonists who are women who did very popular comics in Asia. And when I moved here, I realized it's really not the case here. And it's when you're reading a comic book, you don't really think about who made them. You just read it for the story. But when there's a panel like this, or if there's an article about how few there are and how imbalanced, like proportion of female creators are out there, that actually then made me aware. And I think for that purpose, it's necessary to have a discussion like this.
I would like to ask you something about that, Robin. How do you think that, like, Asian comics compare to American comics in terms of things being explicitly marketed as, like, girls' comics versus boys' comics? Do you think it's, like, the same amount of segregation, or more or less?
Well, I think that, like, there is no doubt that there are so many women reading comics in Asia, and it's very well marketed for them. So a lot of stories are written for female, like the drawing styles are drawn for female, and it's really no question, like it's done for female. Whereas here, it's much harder to find a comic book just for female audience. And if there are, I think the stories are a little bit more limited in a way, because in Japanese manga or Korean comics, like there's all kinds of heroes, all kinds of story, action, mystery, romance for girls. But here it's not so diverse, I would think, and I think that's changing, and I think it should be changing. But as of now, from what I can see, it's not quite in that level of diversity yet, I think.
Could I just add something to that? Because I like the first comics that made me decide I wanted to do comics was manga. And so yeah, I think a lot of us can say that manga really changed our perspectives on comics. And in that respect, that's totally true. And I was just thinking about this recently, about how manga, I mean, even though they are written specifically for a gender, and that way it's still kind of, it makes it sort of like reverse gendered? I don't know. Because, okay, I'm thinking in particular, okay, the comic that really won me over was Ranma One Half.
Oh yeah, me too.
Which, if you guys don't know, it's a comic written by a woman. It's this martial arts comic, and I think, I don't even know if it is written for women or not. I think
it was actually shonen manga.
It's shonen manga, so it's for
boys. Yeah.
But it won me over. But anyway, this comic, it's like this boy named Ranma, okay? He fell into this ancient crazy hot spring, and then if he gets doused with cold water, he turns into a girl. And then if he gets doused with hot water, he turns back into a boy. So, yeah, it was like kind of awesome. So, yeah, so this is the idea of the comic, that there's kind of this gender play throughout the whole comic.
But there's so many of them in Japanese comics. Do you realize that? Like that gender bending, like cross-dressing,
that's what I mean, yeah.
Like,
that's true.
It's like almost like 1/3 of comics I read when I was young. It was like that, you know?
It's totally true. Like, I've read comics like space comics about androgynous, people who look like women and how they're being treated and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I'm mostly talking about Ranma because I know that the best, because I've read it a lot. But, the thing with this comic is that they really reinforce, for example, oh, Ranma's a girl, she's forgetting that her arms are not as long and she's slimmer, and so she can't punch the guy right, and that sort of thing. And they like, oh man, guys are hitting on her now because she's now a woman. And so in a way, it was, when I was a kid, I mean, it was more appealing for me to read this kind of thing, because it was like, because at the time the alternative was superhero comics. That didn't appeal to me at all, I mean, in any way. But looking back at it now, it's like, it still kind of had it still had its gender issues. I mean, they were totally different. and I prefer them over superhero comics and stuff, but they still have their kind of gender issues. They definitely have like this sort of, I don't know what word other than gender play, but
Right.
yeah, so.
Totally.
Well, you're calling out some examples of things that in some ways have been positive for your reading experience.
Yeah.
Are you prepared to call out things that have been negative experiences or things you've noticed in more recent years that drew attention to the fact that there are problems in comics for women?
You know, this is sort of a positive and a negative one, but I started reading the new Wonder Woman just because I was like, I gotta try some DC stuff, and it was, you know, the art's great. I really liked Cliff Chang's artwork, but I don't know. The first story arc is basically they sort of changed her origin, and that she used to be born not of a man, just sort of came out of the clay and became was given life by the goddess Athena, I think it was. Anyways, one of the Greek goddesses.
Athena, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a really, like, I'd known that much about Wonder Woman, but in this new version, it's like now she's like sort of the bastard child of Zeus and blah blah blah, and I just sort of lost enthusiasm. And that was sort of it for a while, but then I decided I wanted to try the original Wonder Woman, and it was such an amazing experience, because the original Wonder Woman is fantastic. I think it translates so well today. It's funny, I'm like laughing out loud, the stories are incredible, and it's just, I think what it made me, like the thing that stood out the most for me about the original Wonder Woman was that she was so strong and so wonderful, but it wasn't really a big deal. She just kind of like was, and people acknowledged that. And then there would be a couple naysayers, a couple like thugs who'd be like, "Hey, is that girl kicking us?" But then they get punched, and you're like, "All right, great." That was like, you know, a few naysayers, and then everyone else would just get kind of smashed. But like, she just was great, and you know, her love interest, Steve Trevor, was just like, "No, it's not me. It's Wonder Woman. She's amazing." And everyone's just like, "Yeah, she's a wonderful being to help the dirty, sullied world of men." And it was just, I think the tone of it being that she was still funny, she wasn't preachy, and she was still kicking butt, but it was just kind of a given. And that pointed out to me how, like, if there are empowered, especially superhero characters, it's sort of like an other thing, like, wow, look at her, she's doing her own thing, you go girl. And in the original Wonder Woman, among many other things, like the bondage stuff, it's just wonderful, all over, it's great, but it just was a given. And I was like, this tone of it being like, this is just how it is something that I really respond to a lot more than like sort of super preachy. I don't know, that's, yeah.
So, like, the more self-aware, like, gender issues being put forward, almost like commentary in the text, is that something that feels too heavy to you?
You know, it depends on the context. Like, if it's sort of the point of the story, then I'm like, by all means, let's talk about it. But I think there's certain stories where, like, okay, superhero, well, the main aspect is, like, the superhero is trying to battle injustice and evil. And there's all different kinds of injustices that can happen, so gender issues can be a part of that. And even in the original Wonder Woman, she's raising protests, like actually with signs and pickets, like she's doing all this good for the community, aside from just like pummeling guys into the ground. And I liked that aspect, but that the first and foremost thing is that she's here to battle injustice. And then the gender thing is sort of incorporated in there as like, I don't know if that makes sense. Just that I prefer stories where there's, like, especially with genre comics, where there's like noir, horror, that these things that come first, and the gender issues should just be kind of like, well, yes, of course she's, you know, able to hold her own in a situation like that. Why wouldn't she? And that's just my preference.
Right.
Anybody else observations about things you've read that made you realize there were still issues, there were still things that need to be done?
The costumes needs to be changed.
Superhero comics?
Yes.
Yes.
It's clearly for men to look at. I mean, what kind of woman would want to wear that to a battle? Like, it's not realistic at all.
I know, I always joke that, like, if you, like, twist your body like this, your boob will pop out.
Seriously.
It's not practical at all.
Costuming is very, very strange in superhero comics, again, just because it's so much, even for the men, it's like a sexualization. It's about, like, the pure virile form. And so that's such a it's not subtle at all.
Yeah.
And so you try to put that sort of virile thing onto a woman, and it's just like, shiny and poppy and
I
weird.
think the costume question is always interesting because I see a lot of like redesigns of costumes where it's like give her like combat boots and military pants, and those are kind of cool, but they're also not as dynamic. And so I feel like we can sort of get to a middle ground where the costumes are still really exciting and dynamic, but they're not like the male gaze like all the time.
Right.
And
Yeah.
right now, there's like such a huge movement in fashion in general, where like people in MTV looks like a superhero. You know, they have big hairs, they have crazy costumes, and it doesn't always have to be sexualized. You know, but still be very exciting to look at.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree.
Yeah, and you know, especially with all the new genre work, like historical fiction, all these sort of like emerging hybrid genres, the costuming can take from a lot of different places. Like, you don't have to have just a Victorian character wear a Victorian corset that's crushing her ribs. Like, you could sort of, I don't know, add some steampunk in there. Like, you can slide in these things that make sense in the context, and they don't have to be totally terrible for the characters, male or female.
Right. Or, you know, and yeah, or have them be, you know, have them be kick-ass in their respective place and time. I mean, you know, going back to what you said about how you kind of want strong characters to be incidental and not just like, I'm a woman, I have to do, you know, like being really like preachy about it. It's kind of a way of doing that, where it's like kind of underhandedly through costume or through, you know, a lot of other means, making it clear that that you know, this character, you know, might be a little bit of a rebel, or, you know, might, you know, have. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there are ways to get through indirectly to get your point across.
And I wanted to ask you, on Journey to Panjit?
Panjikan.
Panjikan. Wow, I butchered that.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Because I've only seen the first couple of pages. You have, you know, there's like male and female garb. Have you incorporated any of that sort of like? What's your opinion on the comic that you're working on in reference to the costuming and sort of?
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Just so you guys know, I'm currently working on historical fiction. It's about the Silk Road. So that's what she's talking about. Thank you. That's the reaction I want. That's awesome. So the costume, yeah. I mean, because I actually did a lot of research before I started working on the comic. I did like 2 years worth of research. And, you know, the clothing, and, you know, part of the reason why I chose this particular place and time, it's Central Asia during the 7th century, is because because gender, I mean, does play a role in the comic, but I find it extremely dynamic and interesting. Like the clothing, you know, they wore really bright, colorful clothing, but the differences between the men and women's clothing really wasn't that much. So there wasn't really the kind of, I mean, like they wore skirts and stuff, but they still wore pants under the skirt, and they were kind of active and stuff. So there wasn't really the kind of constricting. And, you know, also, this is one thing I totally love. Okay, there's they actually have found a marriage contract from this time. Okay, their marriages were actually really dynamic and really forward-thinking for the time, even though they allowed polygamy. Polygamy was a thing, but this contract was very much like, you know, you will treat each other totally like, you know, like royalty, and if one of you isn't happy, then you can just split and take your property. Like, it was very egalitarian, actually, for the time. And it even mentioned that, you know, if this guy already has wives, you all got to get along, because, like, if you don't, then, like, you can split up, you know, they want this harmonious thing. And you look at this in, compared to China, it was not like that at all. I mean, I mean, like, women in China really didn't have it all that great at the time. So, I mean, in that regard, I mean, you know, they still had their gender issues, but in that regard, I mean, I really wanted to highlight this particular time period for those reasons.
And the flexibility of what you could do with a character in
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think historical fiction and historically inspired genre is kind of interesting because I think people sometimes use it almost as an excuse to say, like, well, it's like Victorian England, so everyone is sexist already, so like it's fine. But it's sort of amazing when you actually start researching how many instances there are of like female leaders and female warriors, and how it's
Yeah.
you can so easily like the history is much more complex than we think of it as, and it's a pet peeve of mine is historically inspired fiction where they use it as an excuse because it's like it's Victorian England but there's like steampunk but still retrograde sexism, and it's like if there's like steampunk then you could also have gender equality and that's fine. Like if I'm believing that like your hat runs on steam power, like women can vote.
Opens the door somehow. Yeah.
On that note, I'm actually reading it right now. This manga called Oku. It's based on, I guess, I don't know what it's called, but it's like thousands of years ago in like a fictional Japan where the emperor, totally male dominated society is overturned by this disease that kills all male child, basically. So they have no way to keep this reign unless a female steps in because there's no male heir left. And it's very exciting to see this like hypothetical reality where it shows like not easily but with a lot of trial and error like women can rule as well as men or even better than men in some cases. And it's really interesting because that era in Japan is definitely very unequal time period for women. Like women had to die when like the husband dies, and you know like they're basically like treated as a property. And it's, I guess, my theory on why like especially in manga there's a lot of like instances where like women dress up as a man or women like hides their identity as a woman and you know goes to male school or whatever, is that maybe this is the way they can actually experiment with what it could be if it was real, like equal like that.
Right.
And as a viewer, that's definitely something I want to see more in real life.
Just not to that extreme of having all the male children die.
Oh yeah.
A little
Minus
bit
that, minus that.
I think it's really cool to upset the general like stereotype that people have that history has just been proceeding from like most oppressive to most egalitarian
Right.
now, or like Molly was saying, this idea that if you're setting something in history-ish that it has to be really sexist. So yeah, I think it's great to explore periods where gender roles were really different and sometimes for the better.
Yeah, and it also shows us that we haven't been like going up a stairway to perfect.
Right.
Like,
That's true.
Like
Yeah.
that like it goes up and down, and we have to sort of consciously focus on keeping our gender roles like positive.
Yeah.
Or it upsets the idea that certain things are traditional throughout history and it must be that way.
Or that history is everyone who's written a history book has their own bias. That is the one of two things public school taught me. The other one was to bullshit, but the first one was that everybody who writes a history book has a bias and a perspective. And so,
that's true.
you know, I feel like since we're in an age of information, it's a lot easier to maybe it's not easier, maybe it's more overwhelming, but either way, the option to do deeper research is a little bit more accessible to see where these holes are of history, where things were different. That's great.
I agree. That's awesome.
Those were amazing observations. Thank you.
Gotta get them all.
Because I'm a medievalist. That's my academic background.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a Dark Age medievalist. So
Demonology.
yeah, there you go. Well, I read a lot of occult comics. That's just my history. I was actually thinking here, because you're talking about costuming, whether it's historical in its setting or not, how much conscious thought or what do you think your tendencies are when you're designing the look of female characters? Are you consciously thinking I need to present this in a certain way, or are you going for what's natural to you, like in designing characters' costumes, their physical appearance? Anyone?
Well, a lot of my characters tend to be in like contemporary day settings, and like Tales of the Night Watchman, which is the superhero comic that I work on with Dave. She's a girl from Brooklyn, so I'm like, okay, she's wearing t-shirts and skinny jeans, like, and I always I just think about what I would want to wear, and maybe some things that I'd like to buy that I haven't had money for. But essentially, it's like, okay, what do girls like to wear? What is high fashion for women about? Slouchy, big stuff, not really that tight fitting, and like, yeah. So I always, when I first design a character, I tend to have them in sort of a really, like, just my first sketch of them is like them in a relaxed pose, kind of slouchy, not showing anything off. And then from there, I, will further be like, okay, well, she's not going to be too baggy a t-shirt. She might be a little, but I tend to downplay, I think, any of the extremely sexualized parts of the body, at least the first round, and then sort of pick out what parts. Well, she's got a bigger booty, and that's cool, so we'll show that off a little bit. But, like, so that's my first attack. I don't know what you guys, a lot of you do more.
Yeah, I think about characters.
Different. I mean, you have, Molly. Your characters are in totally different. Like they're superhero, or they're in. I don't even know what the fantasy.
Yeah, I think about it a lot, and what I've been thinking about a lot recently is having really dynamic and exciting costumes and silhouettes that still sort of show that the character is female. And so sort of like if I'm having like an armored character, to not have them just wear male armor, and like maybe it's like if you're like gonna get technical, maybe it's slightly less practical, but I think it's sort of important to show that they're female and that that's sort of part of their strength and part of the like design of their costume. Yeah.
Journey through the Valley of the Whispers?
It's so long.
To the Valley. No. It's Journey.
Yeah,
that costume is sort of like different pieces of leather, right? Sort of going at different
like iron
and buckles and stuff. But like it all works very well.
Yeah.
It seems realistic and but feminine.
My other influence is my nerdy history, which I used to live action role play, and so I have a really good idea of like what kind of costumes work and like what's like actually really hard to like run through the woods in. Like, yeah, like awesome. A lot of fantasy like
experience.
No, a lot of fantasy design. I'll see it, I'm like that would fall right off.
That's cool. That's totally cool.
Super cool.
I think costume is definitely a huge part of like showing what the characters do and who they are. Because like comic is a very visual medium, and when you first look at a page, there is a character, you look at how they look like first. You don't really read what they say. You look first. And I think costuming is a very good way to show like the changes in characters. Like one character might start as like a meek, like shy character, and she would dress a certain way. And then if something happened to her and she becomes more like confident, more like a full individual, maybe she will dress up differently. Like I would experience like, I don't dress like this when I was in high school. Right. And like you change how you dress, and that's I think a good way to show how your character changes in your comic book. So like to have like, let's say like the White Queen dressed in white corset for like, I don't know, 50 years, never change. That's wrong,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I haven't read If This Be Sin. I've read a couple pages that you have on your website, but you obviously have sort of a period piece and then a character who are wearing female characters wearing male costuming.
The main character is a drag king, essentially, or at least, I mean, it's debatable whether she's trying to, like, fool people into thinking that she is male or is just, like, cross-dressing, but whatever. There's a lot of cross-dressing. I think when it comes to fashion or what you wear, it's about the role that you want to create for yourself or how you want to present yourself.
So it's never explicitly said, like, if that character wants to be seen as male or drag. Is that what you're saying? Because that's interesting, because, like, costume's a great way to sort of diffuse those lines, where those things don't have to be answered. Right. It's kind of
seems like it was kind of in a time period before there were specific terms for
that's true, too.
Sort of a drag king or a transgender.
Right, yeah, so it's kind of hard to say how the character, the real person, Gladys, would have regarded herself, so I don't want to put too many modern terms on her, but I don't know. Just in my own life and in dressing characters, I've thought a lot about fashion and, like, whether it's all a scam of like the male gaze and what companies want you to buy and blah de blah, or whether they're. But I think I've come to see a value in it too as a form of self-expression, and it could come to like what gender you want to be seen as, or if you want to let people know that like you have a certain orientation just so you can meet other people with that, or interests. So, you know, I think that's how real people dress, and I try to think about how the characters would want to present themselves.
Yeah, in Tales of the Night Watchman, we have a character named Serena who's sort of an androgynous, like 18-year-old girl. She is a girl, but we sort of never really. There's a couple shots where you can kind of see she has a feminine form, but she basically wears like white t-shirt, a big leather coat, and combat boots, and she's just been a fun character because she's just really fun to draw, and she's pretty spunky. But it's been nice to sort of just like not have it out there, but not really make an opinion of it, whether she's like specifically transgender or if she's just into girls or whatever. I don't know. We sort of discovering these things as we've moved along with the story. And we did do a mini comic where she encounters this really attractive, sexy lady named Roxy, and it was actually a really interesting comic just in reception because we showed it to a lot of people. We were really proud, and it's basically like, you know, kind of this sexy smoking lady comes in and she like is totally wowed, and they go dancing, and they have this whole night, and then she ends up like getting too nervous at the last minute and runs off. But we had sent it to a couple of people for review, and a lot of people were like, oh, I love the story about this guy and this girl, and it was just I think one of the things, one of the questions that you had sort of sent to us, Hannah, before this was about what are some of the things that hinder audience reception of work. And this comic reminded me that it was sort of expectations. I mean, it wasn't bad that our readers thought that this was a boy who was really into this girl. I mean, we never thought about it. We didn't make any explicit things to say that she was in fact female. We just, you know, we know the character and we didn't think about it. And that's fine. It's not like this person had necessarily anything out against lesbian relationships, but it's just interesting because there's certain expectations for things to go a certain way. And, you know, I think that's sort of the biggest, to transition, that's sort of the biggest thing that's hindering audience and creators' receptions, is that whether we like it or not, there are certain expectations, and how you can sort of break them, and for my preference, how you can break them without having to like take out your bullhorn and scream at people. How do you do it in subtlety, and how do you do it to add to your story is sort of an interesting issue.
Yeah.
Or challenge. Good challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when you make a piece and put it out into the world to see how people react to it. I always get really interesting responses to my work, and it's always really good to know. And it's always good for me to keep in mind what, you know, it helps you figure out how to manipulate, I mean, not the audience, but manipulate the work so people get the general gist of where I'm trying to go. I mean, it just kind of, it's reminding me, I mean, my comic, my new one, gender plays a bit of a role in it, so it's kind of important to know the genders of the characters. And I have this one character, Vendek, who's like, he's a kid. He's like 11 years old. And the style at the time is that they had really like kind of longish hair. So I gave him like this kind of longish, like shoulder length hair, and he's a kid, so he's, you know,
beautiful.
Yeah, he's a little cute, you know, he's like a kid. And I've had so many people like, is that a girl? What's going on? And I'm like, no, he's a little boy. So, you know, but again, it plays a role that he's the brother and that she's the sister. So, but it's an interesting thing to learn. So,
and you sort of have to navigate as like the orchestrator of your comic, what things you're like, is it really important that they know he's a boy? And obviously in that case it is. And then like in our case, when it's the Serena character, I'm like, is it important they know she's a girl? And yes, no, I guess. So it's kind of like what things you're gonna choose to point out, and which ones you're gonna be like, no, that's cool. Like open to interpretation. Which is also, I think, a good step towards sort of widening the different types of archetypes, if you will, in gender identity, is not putting necessarily finite labels. I mean, that's sort of like, I think,
Well, it's just
what people
so-
are moving towards, because there's so many. I mean, to think that's just one or the other is silly. There's so many people with so many different variations. So to sort of open that and not question it as being unusual or putting it in its own category. Like, well, okay, you can be the other, but there's only 3 different other types. It's like, no,
Right.
we could just have a whole, a whole rainbow of different options. But yeah, that there's all different variations, and that it's not necessarily important to put them into subheadings.
Right. And I think, I mean, I find it totally exciting.
Yeah.
Like, I completely love it. And it's sort of the thing, like, I'm trying to think, the one comic I can really think of that I feel like started doing that was Berlin. Do you know,
Okay.
like,
Yeah,
Jason
I
Lee's
haven't
Berlin?
read it, but yes, I know of it.
Oh, it's great.
Good covers.
Good
Very
covers.
good
Very good covers. He's really great at drawing. It takes him a really long time to draw, like, to do his work. But that sort of played around, that's one of the first comics I can think of that really started playing around with gender roles and things like that. Because I mean, it takes place in Berlin in the 1920s, and which, you know, at the time, I mean, it was known at the time as being kind of this gender exploratory time period.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I highly recommend.
Especially because I've read the back of the book and it was like a story about people, and I'm like, great. but
Sign me
now
up.
that I know a little more, that's interesting.
Yeah, totally give it a look. Give it a look. So,
When did that come out, do you know? Or how recent is that?
It's been a while.
it's been a while. Yeah.
20 years?
Something like that.
That's a stretch.
Feels like
No.
it.
It
Yeah.
does, yeah.
He's
He's
significant that it's
No,
been
it's
around
like
that
at
long.
least
That's
10.
good.
it's been at least 10. I mean, he works really slowly on it. I think he's still making it even. You know, there's a couple of volumes out, and it's just like, you know, maybe every 5 years he'll come out with one. It's like, yay, score.
Ongoing.
Yeah.
But it sounds like maybe I'm interpreting wrong because I'm not an artist, but it sounds like what we're talking about is that the language of comics, the visual language, in many ways has been established and is a bit stuck. And when people read, they're identifying these archetypes, like you're saying, but they're identifying like a short form. And so some readers are going to misidentify what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
If you all are forward thinking enough to start pushing those, you know, that language. So it seems like establishing a new language is what creators have to do if they want to have more freedom with those archetypes. And it's going to be rough sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
You know, to do that, to establish a new language. And it's just kind of what I'm hearing coming out of that.
There will be translation issues.
Yeah, exactly. It's a translation. It's like people learning a different language that's familiar to their own, but it's quite different. It's like when you invent new slang or new words that people
Right.
don't know yet.
Yeah.
It's currency. The more you use it, the more people will become familiar. Which kind of leads me to a question I didn't really talk about before. I didn't talk to you all about before. What is it about the internet that is helping with this? Like, some of you do online stuff. I think most of you have some connections. Is that going to help spread a new language in different ways or faster? Or are there drawbacks, you know, to using the internet for comics right now?
Yes. To all of them. Yeah, I think the internet is by and large an incredible tool for building a comics career, but it's also, in a wider sense, it's incredible because you can directly connect or directly read things or see things that give you a window into the lives of people that you would never know normally. And I think it's an incredible tool for creating empathy. And there's just everyone's on the internet, and so you can find communities of people who are interested in what you're creating. Sort of almost guaranteed there is a community of people, and if there's not, they will form around your work. So I think it's for making new kind of gender roles and making new archetypes. There are already people there so many people who are like hungry for it and who want it.
Right.
And it's not happening as much in mainstream media, but it's happening in a big way online. So I think and people know that, I hope.
Yeah. But I mean, there's so much good, but, you know, the bad obviously is that it is really hard to make money putting things on the internet. And so it's always trying to find that happy medium of, okay, I'm making this thing and I'm pouring myself into it. I would like to make a little bit of money doing it. And so how much do I put online? How much do I not? How much do I charge for? And that sort of thing. I mean, that's always the struggle. But in regards to actually building an audience, and I think Heidi's timely piece the other day.
Should we tell?
Maybe, yeah.
Heidi McDonald's piece on The Beat, was it published on The Beat?
Yeah.
That was about the Comics Journal hardly ever having female creators featured, and really not that many female contributors as essayists either.
Yeah.
So it was an issue. Sorry, go ahead.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Went through the numbers.
Yeah, she actually did research, and what was it, like 6 pages out of 1,000 some odd that actually had women as the subject.
Oh,
Yeah, it was.
It's kind of more shocking in print when you see the big tomes.
Yeah.
And you look
Yeah,
at this
I mean,
big
they're, like,
tome and you're like,
enormous.
okay, there's absolutely not a single female name mentioned in this entire tome.
Yeah.
You know, it's an issue. Anyway, we
But
derailed
yeah,
you.
I'm sorry. But she mentioned something that I thought that was that I thought was extremely true, and that's the gatekeepers are kind of crumbling. The Comics Journal used to be this big gatekeeper. It was like, this is the one authority, in the indie comic scene, and that's it. And it's just the internet has just completely crumbled that idea. I mean, obviously people still kind of cling on to that, otherwise this wouldn't be an issue. And the Comics Journal is still kind of a big name, but at the same time, there are definitely ways to go around. Like, I know so many people who just built up their fan base just completely on Tumblr or whatever, and they were able to get published through that. They go to Comic-Con and they're just completely, they got fans coming over and everything. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, it really is. It's phenomenal and totally exciting. The thing that we need to figure out now is how to make money off of it. I really think that's the problem. Just figure out a way how to really make money off of this, and to if not make a living, just feel like it's financially worth your time. But
I haven't put a lot of web comics online, or any, really, just snippets of my work, but just an interesting thing that I've noticed seeing other people and their readerships is that, like, there's so much commitment too, and the internet is something where you're on Tumblr and you're like, image, reblog, done, and you're just consuming things and like throwing like this amazing thing, and you're just like consuming it and throwing it and chalking it and reblogging it and not really digesting it.
Yeah,
but
that's
I'm
true.
finding with webcomics, which can also be digested really quickly, I was a madwoman this week, just like clicking through things, and I'm like, I'm nauseous and so excited. But there really is a serious readership, and I think response. Molly and I and Dave, we tabled at SPX, and it was just amazing to see your fans come out and really have connection to your work. And
Yeah.
it's like they're not just consuming it like it's sweet tarts, like they're really digging into it.
Yeah, was amazed when I started SF, or Strong Female Protagonist, because it's maybe a little like headier. It's like there's like not a lot of jokes or cute animals. Not to knock webcomic. That's a webcomic thing. But like I was amazed at like the level that people have engaged, and that like people have sent me like really intelligent emails and like, but like I get these like very long like emails where people are thinking about it, and it's like it's very good to know that it's on the internet and could be consumed very quickly, but people are treating it like it's like a story, which it is.
And comics are special in that you don't have to be at the place of the comic's inception. I mean, like, there's lots of pros that way too, but coming from a fine arts background, you have to go to the gallery to really get a sense of what you're looking at, and you can have an intimate experience with a work of art that's comics in your bedroom with your pants off. Like, you can. I'll find out that intimate. Sorry.
Yay!
Before you go to bed.
Sorry. Come on. All right, but yeah. So
That's our headline.
There you go.
But that's one of the reasons that just personally I was drawn to comics too, because it's like I could give this to someone and they could really have an experience with it, and they can take their time, and I don't have to be there, or I could be. It's amazing that people can really engage with the work and will think about it afterwards.
Yeah.
This just reminds me of something I wanted to say about sort of, you were talking about the language of comics. The nice thing about comics is you can put a lot into a panel, and it doesn't have to be the most important thing there. So,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of what I do in most of my panels, and I'm sure, I think most of you guys do the same thing, is like have a diverse, like if there's a crowd scene, you've got a diverse range of people, and it's again sort of my idea of like, it's not a thing, it's like they're just diverse people in a crowd, that's how it is. But like you can have, you know, like different type of people in a crowd, and like I have some scene in the last issue of Tales of the Night Watchman where politician sort of like preaching and a crowd goes around him, and I've got like a gay couple holding hands, and I've got like a bunch of hipster lady, like all different types of people hanging out, and it's just like there it is, and it's just natural, and you can just put it in, and people can dig into it as deep as they want, or they can just like look over it because they're consuming it very quickly. Right. But that's a nice thing about comics, and you can't do that in film. Like you can put some stuff in the background, but like the cut, and then you're on to the next scene, and you can't do that necessarily even in prose, because you have to sort of point it out to people. But in comics there's lots of subtle things you can stick in there. And you know, Molly illustrated an issue of Tales of the Night Watchman, and there's this great scene in a movie theater where this couple is making out, and it's just like it's just there, like you can notice it or you cannot.
Well, I think comics are great because the reader is happening to the comic. The comic isn't like a movie like happens to you, but the reader is happening to the comic, and so you really choose your pace that you're going through, and you can definitely like inject like all kinds of things into it that a careful reader will find, and maybe a quick reader will absorb subconsciously. Like,
and it's fun as a creator too.
Yeah,
I mean, I drew so many like hipster tattoos. I was so excited. I was like, oh, so many geometric shapes and like half moon circles, and I was like, this is great. And
that
is
like, what it's all about.
It's both like a celebration and like fun.
Yeah,
you know. So it was great.
I think that it's kind of overwhelming. I mean, it's such a great medium to reach out to people and like get like feedbacks from people that you would never have chance to otherwise. But as a reader, like I always feel like I'm missing out on something because there's so many out there, and because of that, I feel like I don't really spend enough time as I used to reading like one comic book, you know? I used to read comics over and over again, the same thing, because I loved it so much. But now I feel like it's just kind of more, I don't know, a little bit shallower consumption than it used to be when it was actually like a book or, you know.
That's true, yeah. I mean, that could be from so many things, too. I've noticed that my pace I've been really trying hard to slow down, because it's so easy, especially you're just like, what? Like, if it's a good story, you want to turn the page. But, like, trying to slow down. But, yeah, that's true. That's tough. I get, like, jittery. I'm like, no. Look, it's like, this is beautiful. Don't just flip the page. This is gorgeous.
I think it's easy as a creator to think, I spent 12 hours on this page and I hope the reader will spend equally as long absorbing it. But
that's true.
Like, at least we can all have the hope that what we put in will work subconsciously to give it more richness.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think at the very least people will see the amount of work that it looks like it took on the page and can and at least absorb it, even if they're going through it really quickly.
Yeah. Right. You're world building, so like it's okay you don't notice that those things are there, but the fact that they're there, I mean that there's a structure and a thing happening there.
And some people totally notice. Like,
some people do.
Really do.
Yeah.
I have people who I have like a weird mistake that I make whenever I draw feet, where I put the toes on the wrong side. And I have people email me every time I do it, and they're like, just so you know, the toe's wrong. It's like, thank you for reading so closely.
Do you go back and fix it?
I do, yeah. It's really embarrassing. I should know how feet work at this point.
I mean, I hate to be like the devil's advocate here, but a lot of the freedom that you're discussing is relative to creator owned, in putting these things in the background and putting these messages and things you hope the reader gets. So I can see two things. I mean, obviously creator owned comics are huge right now, bigger than they've ever been. And the freedoms that offers for female creators can be huge too. And you can find your own fan base and your readership and maybe make some money. I mean, Faith Erin Hicks went from doing webcomics in college that she thought no one would ever read to having huge indie readership that made her then decide to go bigger, you know. But that's the thing. What about mainstream? Or would you all consider that? Would it be limiting to you? And how does that relate to the growth in genre comics? Like, I know there's so much from Dark Horse and Image right now that are genre comics. you know, is that an open door for you? Do you feel inclined to move into bigger distribution or with other publishers, or would you prefer to keep like the radical freedom of the creator-owned stuff?
Right.
You know, it's a big question.
It
Sorry.
is a big no. I mean, see, it's hard to say because, I mean, I never. I feel like this particular comic that I'm working on now, there might be an inkling of a chance that some of these publishers might be interested, but for the most part, publishers aren't really interested in the work that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I mean that's just all there is to it. I mean, my previous comic, again, autobio about Palestinian Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was sort of like this very target word thing, and so so I've sort of learned how to be independent from even thinking about, you know, Image or Dark Horse or anything like that. I feel like this is the first comic that I've done that there's the remotest, you know, that there's a possible chance. So I'm working on it right now actually to get it pitched out and everything. But so yeah, basically I'm kind of in new territory with this, even thinking about it. So
A comment on that, but I would like to hear from the rest of you as well. Dark Horse and Image are in new territory too. They're getting in a situation where they have never allowed as much freedom as they do now, because often these comics have been produced already by the time they pick them up, so they can't exactly ask for total redraw of the entire book or whatever. But I mean, I was just shocked how many comics coming out from Image lately have relationship aspects and not just superhero or superpowered stuff. I mean, Image have never been superhero so much, but the action adventure stuff seems to be kind of getting more subdued in favor of these dramatic relationship things going on. I just see a lot of changes in what they're accepting.
Even movies.
Movies
Even
too?
like the new movies of like the superheroes, they're much more like relationship and like character driven than
Yeah.
action.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that big publishers just have to, especially superhero comics, have to step their game up because there's so much exciting stuff going on that people are making for free and putting on the internet or publishing with small companies, and it's just like that level of quality and the level of like exciting new inventive content that's doing things with comics that have never been done before is sort of like showing them up a little bit, in my opinion. So I think they need to stay relevant, so they need to think about like hiring good people.
Robin, you did something for Marvel.
Oh, yeah.
So how was that? I mean, did any of these issues of like what it seemed like you did? I mean, how did it work? Did you work with a writer, and were you able to
Yeah.
sort of insert?
It was
Your own
completely
Easter
like a
eggs?
one-shot deal.
Okay.
But that's the thing. Like, if you are a little bit different, if you are a little bit, you know, doesn't fit into that mold, you get one shot and that's it. You know,
Okay.
like okay, we did it, so we can say like we did it and we're cool and we're different for that one issue. You know?
and then ta-ta.
And the writer that I worked with was Dame Darcy. She's like the crazy, like, very out there artist and musician and all that. And I guess because her story was so, like, girly, it was about Sue Storm and Reed Richards falling in love, but as like a Cinderella and Prince Charming. And my style is very like, I guess like it's pretty, you know, it's like very girly. So my editor at the time, Mike Holwitz, saw my drawings in one of the conventions, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you'll be totally perfect for that." But after that issue ended, that was it, you know? Because like, I mean, I can understand. Like, I don't see myself drawing any superhero comics, and it's not that I don't want to. It's just that it's not me, you know. It's like I would have to change everything about myself and my drawing style to fit into that mainstream comic, and that's not why I became a cartoonist, you know.
Right.
And I would never be happy doing that, even if it brought me a lot of money and publicity or whatever. But like you said, there's like so many different publishers right now who allow a lot of different type of comics to become mainstream, that I think it will be foolish of me to say I would never do that, you know. Like I feel like I would have to open myself for any kind of chance to reach out to any different type of audiences that's out there. But fundamentally, I would not change myself to fit into that, you know.
Yeah, I feel similar. I mean, I would be open to it, but it's like you would have to know the situation. I like constraints. I like having you know, restrictions on what I have to make, because I think for me, it helps me create, like, think of a creative solution to it. So working with, like a publisher, like if Image comes to me and they're like, will you do this film noir? I'll be like, or this noir piece, I'm like, yeah, let me give it a shot. And, you know, sometimes you if it was, like, offensive, you'd have to walk away. I have a friend who's working for Titmouse Studios, and they're an animation studio for, like, a lot of Adult Swim shows. And the latest show, which she did not name, she basically had to walk off it because it was just grossly offensive. I won't even go into it, but, like,
Too bad.
you use your imagination, and it's just a little bit worse. It was terrible. And she had to leave, and of course, you know, with a situation like that, I don't want to say it's easy because it's a job and she had to leave her job, but at the same time, it's like slapping you in the face, like, this does not jive with who I am and what I want to do. But, you know, it would be interesting, the grayer territories. I think I would probably be more flexible, even if it's like I don't get to do everything that I want, just to see what that opportunity is like. But can't say. I gotta wait for them to call me. So I'll let you know.
Anybody else? If you would you work with a mid-range publisher if you thought you could have some degree of freedom, maybe not as much as a webcomic?
Yeah. I would do that.
I have a payroll department. I mean, gotta consider it.
Maybe I'm being unrealistic, but I think that it could happen within the next few years. I think things are heading that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
so too.
I think
for
there's
sure.
so
Female
many
artists, especially drawing some of these great books from Dark Horse and Image. So
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, there's just so many small and mid-sized publishers out there that are doing just really interesting things and really interesting creator-owned or partially creator-owned things that I think I don't think that having it be like a moral compromise is really the situation.
And, you know, who knows if the situation, even if it's not necessarily, I mean, you want it to be creator-owned, but it's not like, it'd be different taking an archetype like Batman. Like, there are certain things you're not going to have Batman cross-dress. You're not going to do that.
Oh my God.
So, like, that's but, you know, like, unless you're working with, like,
Joker for example. Anyway.
unless you're working with these things that are, like, you know, not set in stone, but yeah, essentially, maybe it's not even that big of an issue. Who knows? You know, if you're working with sort of a new entity that's born, maybe you would have more freedom working with a publisher to see how it's going to grow.
And on the technical side of things, a lot of the contracts for those companies are creator-owned. They end up retaining the rights and can sometimes leave up their webcomic at the same time, even after it's published. It depends. Situationally, I've heard both. I've heard that they've been able to leave up their webcomics, and I've heard some that said they had to take them down because it was going to be on Comixology and had to be sold digitally as well, so they couldn't have it up at the same time. And, you know, there's some different issues there. Sorry, just filling that issue in. So we were talking about the limitations of these archetypes that have been established. I mean, when we say genre comics, we're really talking in a way about non-superhero comics and the various types that there are. Why genre comics for you guys, and why are they so big right now? Because they have exploded in the past 5 years in terms of sales. What do you think? We talked a little bit about the freeing factors of using historical time periods, but also what about like horror and we've even got like you know, tie-ins to other forms of media, film and video games and stuff like that. There are a lot more women in genre comics than in superhero comics if you look at the numbers. So I was wondering if you feel drawn towards genre comics.
Personally, I find, especially fantastical comics, things with some element of the supernatural, be it superpowers or magic or like technology, like science fiction technology, I find them to be really, really potent ways to address social issues without having to sort of specify exactly what you're talking about and sort of address general ideas of like taboo relationships or like minority groups or marginalized groups. And so to sort of make it universal by talking about it in this like metaphorical way. And it's also the fan base for those kind of like nerd fiction is not always people who would consider these thoughts. Like there's sort of like definitely a very classic nerd. I don't know how like accurate that is, but I think you can really do a lot of good by having positive social examples and positive role models in stories that draw in people because they have like dragons and magic or spaceships and lasers, but then there's also like a diversity of characters and like positive role models.
Right.
So I think that there's, and I see that more and more, and so I think that a lot of people are excited about that right now, and a lot of people they really love these genres, and maybe like they love Lord of the Rings, but they wish that there was like a single woman in them, or like they love the
Right,
Avengers,
sure.
but like like similar, and so they're kind of taking the aspects that they love, but like not betraying their own social consciousness. So
Yeah, I don't know the quote, but I remember reading a quote once, something about like, if you want people to listen to your cause, make them laugh, you know? That's sort of the
So
same
true.
concept, and not necessarily humor, but just, you know, bring them in with a story that's got like lots of other fun things. And I mean, I would assume we're all geeks, so like we have things that we geek out on. You know, I like certain genres, like I love horror. Like I've always just, it's a taste thing, and so to be able to say something in that vein, it's like the perfect meld. And you know, I don't have a theory on why it's so popular now. I'm very happy, but if nothing else, just that there was a lot of things kind of go in undulating back and forth waves, and there was a lot of autobio stuff that was coming out, you know, previous to now, and it was all very interesting. And like, I would have never read autobio prose, I don't think, honestly, but I started to, just because of comics.
Yeah.
So it could just be literally a reaction, and maybe in a couple of years we'll all be back to autobio, but not that it's gone or anything, but you know what I'm saying, like maybe it's a reaction, or maybe it's not, but I'm happy about it.
But I think it's also, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, just quickly, I think that like our culture is increasingly more visual, and those stories are so visually potent. Like have like all of those genres are just like have a very strong visual style and like exciting settings and costumes, and characters look exciting, and so I think that might tie in also.
Right.
Yeah.
We're also kind of in a depression, and people like exciting stories when
Yeah.
you're in a depression. So.
That's true.
But hey, if you can, like, you know, get to work on something you love, get to read something you love, and then also get to say something with it, like there's no downside to that.
Yeah, I always, this has always been my dream, and it's one of these things. I'm a humongous freaking optimist, and so I think this will happen at some point. I don't know when, but I mean, I would just love to see the equivalent of a Barnes and Noble, except it's full of comics, just like all these different types of comics, just of every single type of genre ever. I mean, that just like for me is the most exciting thing. And you know, and I you know, mentioned earlier about how manga was the thing that really got me into comics. I mean, even before that, when I was really young, I would read these comics by this very famous Palestinian cartoonist, Naji Ali. And his stuff was like very visceral and very political and like very strong. So like my first influences of comics were like this guy, and then going into manga where there's the enormous range of work. I mean, enormous. And it just, to me, is the most exciting thing in the world. I mean, I just love being able to see the, you know, to me there are no limits to where comics can go. Like, I feel like they really can touch everything and go anywhere. I mean, it's just a matter of the industry to grow with, you know, it's just a matter of the industry to grow with that, and to build the fan base to grow with that too. And, you know, I have, you know, I mean, I know I've been saying I'm not a big fan of superhero comics. I don't want them to go away. I want them to be part of it too. I just want this whole thing to fold into.
You want them to get on board.
But
Yeah,
they should have
awesome.
they should have competition for.
They should.
Yesterday in the subway, I was reading X-Men Dark Phoenix Saga, because like I had that book for a while and I read it. Like it took me forever to finish it because I just was not interested in the book at all. But I heard that this is the book. If you want to get into X-Men, you should read it. So I read it. It was like a homework.
You gave it a shot. That's good. That's good.
And then yesterday, I was just like, for preparation for this panel, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just read some mainstream comics so I can have a little bit of an idea. And then someone like noticed me reading it, and this guy was like, oh, you know, it's not every day I find a female X-Men fan. I'm like, I'm not. And I'm like, it's because like it's I mean, I really don't know that many female superhero fans, and it's probably because they don't find anything interesting in those storyline.
Right.
And maybe because of that, like there's so many proportionally more female cartoonists doing genre comics.
So I'm telling you guys, you have to read the original Wonder Woman. It's blowing my mind. And like I've read some Golden Age comics too. Sorry, Dave, I didn't like The Flash. I couldn't do it. But like, it's brilliant, and it's also interesting. I've been reading this book by Mike Madrid called Supergirls, and it's sort of about. I mean, I just started it, but it's this week in preparation. But it's about sort of superheroes, Golden Age superheroes, and a little bit past that are ladies and have been sort of lost to time. And it was making an interesting point about how a lot of these superheroes, when they first came out, like they weren't just about pummeling dudes into the ground or like just defeating the evil that struck up. They were about change and about and Molly, I mean, Strong Female Protagonist is all about this. She's like, I don't just want to be like, I just don't want to punch somebody. I want to actually implement change, and like that makes the character so much more dynamic. I mean, one of the last Wonder Woman issues of original ones that I was reading is like Diana Prince, her by day character, sees that like the milk prices have gone up, and she's like, meets a mother whose child starved to death because they couldn't get the milk. And so she's like, no, and she gets all of her college girls, because she has like a whole group of college girlfriends that like help her out, and she like gets them to like rally against the milk, and like she goes in there as Wonder Woman to be like, what is going on? And then you find out, of course, like an ex-Nazi is like right there. But obviously
drinking all the milk.
Right, exactly, and like trying to drown people with milk. So like, but she does a lot of diverse things, and it's just that could be a great way for superhero comics to move towards, is that it's not just like it's about making the world a better place. I mean, why not? Like, they've got all this amazing power, they might as well get some college girls to rally against the evil milk company. Like, that's great.
And it's interesting because I feel like superheroes were conceived because of this need to to fight against I mean, it's like the whole wasn't Superman really popular during World War II? Am I right on that?
Yeah.
I mean, for that reason, because he was, fighting against these terrible things that were happening, all these atrocities happening in the world. And it's interesting that it came from that and kind of went, off to this more frivolous. I mean, generally, I'm speaking totally generally. I mean, I don't know all the latest trends with superheroes, but it's gone this way, and then we're trying to find a way to put meaning back into these kinds of comics. Yeah, don't you agree?
Yeah, no. And you think about which comic runs have in mainstream superheroes that have stood out the most, and I have certainly not read any of them, but like they're the ones that either have to do with characters or the ones that have to do with things happening, like characters dying and then they're dead, and like, I don't know, just things that have effect. Not sort of this cyclical, like, a guy popped up, punched him down, another guy popped up, punched him down. It's like, there's no change, there's no growth, dramatic arc, there's just nothing. And the ones that stick out are the ones that have people, either characters change or the world changes. Duh. But, part of the reason it's not like that, I think, just is because it's DC Entertainment, and it's like Marvel, it's sort of become now about these cross media entities, and that's a whole other side of business that is like way over my head, and that's probably why the two titans of superhero comics aren't really, they're responding to, I'm sure, surveys and sort of so removed from like raw comics readers. I don't know if they're too far gone. Oh, I'm the pessimist. You be the optimist, I'll be the pessimist. Doomed. But I mean, that's why we're here.
They want to grow their readership base. Like, I feel like change is inevitable.
Right.
Yeah.
I love me some superhero comics. I always have, but it doesn't sustain my interest. It hasn't for probably 15 years now. But like, I still pick up here and there. I'm willing to go back in. Like the new FF with Allred and like Fraction, it's like, oh, this is exciting, it's a little different. So I think that there are chances for like new creative teams to come on and like play with characters, because I think that's all, like, for me, that's like what I'm starving for. I'm gonna go back to that and like seeing, like, I don't know a lot of your work up here, like I really just only know So What Press, but like I clicked on all your names and I was like, damn, this shit looks amazing. You know what I mean? It's like awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe I'll ask one more question. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that good storytelling is all about character development, which is in opposition to this whole like cross-platform marketing, which is like promoted by character stasis or stick with what works. So maybe that's ultimately, or at least one of the basic reasons why independent comics are awesome, is because there's not that pressure to keep the character the same, so you can, in that way,
Yeah.
tell a more
totally.
meaningful story
They're
with
kind
it.
of all like that TV show that goes on too long. Like,
Yeah.
and you're like,
You're like,
stop it at the end.
So good.
Because there's no end, and it's sort
Yeah.
of.
That's true. You don't have to deal with the legacy. That's a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Batman's awfully heavy right now.
Awfully heavy.
And that heavy continuity is what keeps new readers from approaching.
Oh, yeah.
I can speak
It's
from my
like-
experience
Yes.
coming back to comics that if the issue says, 500, I'm a little put off. But if they're starting, at number 1 again, that's just a trick. It's not necessarily a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to follow necessarily what they're talking about. I was just gonna maybe I'll ask one more question and then we'll open it up and have some. Are we good for time?
Oh yeah, we're okay.
We're okay for a while, yeah. So, kind of giving you your platform here. I want, if you feel comfortable, I would like each of you to answer. What do you want? What would make your lives better as female creators? What do you want the future to be? What sort of changes and things? If you could have your wish, regarding women in comics right now, what would it be?
Well, I would want more of my female friends to be reading comics. I think I would want more people reading comics across the board. But I think, and this is maybe not even necessarily just about on the feminist stance, just that I would like more people to be reading comics, to be acknowledging it as like, it is not, comics is not the genre. Comics is the medium. And I just, I have a lot of friends who still don't have any idea exactly why I like to tell stories this way. And that stories, and I don't know, just for people to read comics, to feel like stories are important, because they do. I just think, I feel like I have to help people's hands a little bit. I would just like everyone to read comics. Yeah.
Sounds good. I agree. I mean, I pretty much feel the same way. I mean, I was mentioning this earlier when, because I went to SVA for my undergrad, and our class, our class was the first one where the male to female ratio was split 50-50. I actually majored in cartooning, and so that was a really big deal. And I'm seeing this steady progression towards, comics in general being accepted, which leads to more women being in comics anyway. So I feel like it's going to go in this direction. I have no idea how long it'll take, but I do think it's going in this way. And in terms of my my comic, I've shown it to a lot of people who they don't consider themselves comic readers, but they've been very accepting of the work. I mean, and I think it's partially because they don't, like I've had people say, like, I didn't know comics could do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's just a matter of just building up more of the fan base and just, educating more non-comics people. I mean, basically, I think the more non-comics people we have reading comics, the better. I mean, that's really, and like
totally.
people, just people who aren't just like, they're like really big in the fandom of comics. They're just like, like people who randomly pick up one of these books, just like, oh, I like to read a book occasionally. Like, have people who like to occasionally read comics.
Right. Yeah, and I think, because it's not like the issue is necessarily to re-educate comics readers, like, you guys, stop hating on everyone.
Yeah,
I
know.
It's more like everyone's pretty intelligent, and, haters are gonna hate, but, like, it's more about bringing people into the fold, because you're right, a lot of non-comics people who do pick up a book are, like, stunned that they can relate to it.
Yes. Yes.
I think there has to be like a demolition of barriers between like medium. If everybody treats comics just like books or movies or any kind of entertainment form, there are just as many people going to movie theaters, men and women, and reading any kind of books, men and women, So I think that's like in a perfect world that I want to live in. It's like people would treat it just like anything else, like any other medium.
Yeah. I'd also like to add another thing to my perfect world, that there'd be a breakdown between different types of comics, because I know there's a huge divide, and like some superhero readers will never look at an indie comic, they don't even understand, and then I know a lot of indie comic people who will be like, what is that you're reading? You know, so like, we're a niche within a niche within a niche. Like, let's all that barrier as well.
It's true.
Would be great.
It's too small of a world. The comics world's way too small
to start putting up hierarchies of what is better and what is not, versus especially on the level of that. I mean, content's one thing, but like surface looking at it, you know, I don't know. That's not a reason to split barriers or erect barriers.
Yeah. I think we're headed towards this perfect world, because I really think that, like, when I go into comic shops, I never, like, I guess I've heard people say, like, as a woman, I feel weird in a comic shop. I've never really experienced that. I feel like usually I go to, like, Bergen Street and, like, Forbidden Planet, so maybe they're sort of shishi, but, like, it's like there's half women and half men working there and, like, shopping there. And I think, like, when I go to comic conventions, I would say, like, possibly even there are more women than men at, like, SPX or MoCA. And there's just, like I said, like, our class at SVA is more women. And so I think it's really exciting. For me, my perfect world as a creator is just to have more female characters in all mediums, like, especially movies, which I think are highly influential.
Yeah.
And just, like, I think more than prescribing any one thing that's wrong with, like, female characters or wrong, like the right way to portray a woman, there just need to be more of them, and there need to be, like, side female characters and, like, old female characters and, like, random bad guy female characters who, like, get beaten up. Like, it's like my personal, like, Bechdel test is, like, if the like random bad guy minions, if some of them are women, that's, like, a good comic. And it's incredibly rare.
It's
and
rare.
I think, like, it's just, like, when it stops being a special thing and, like this is a good panel, but, like, when we stop having panels like this, I think that's gonna be, like, awesome, because it'll just be it'll be like, we don't need to talk about it anymore, we're here and now we can sort of, like, tell adventure stories or whatever we want.
Do you want to answer?
Yeah, alright. So maybe this is in opposition to Molly saying that, like, all types of female portrayals there's a place for them, you know, as long as they're diversity. Yes, but I was gonna say, let's just, like, forget everything where the woman is only a passive prize. I'm not saying that, like, I don't like any stories that have that, or there aren't any good ones, but just, like, there's enough. We can stop.
We've explored that genre.
And broader standards of, or no standards of beauty, maybe even reflected in comics would be really cool. I know there was that whole kerfluffle recently about, like, one of the Frozen animators said that it was, like, too hard to have different looking types of women because they needed to look pretty all the time. I'm paraphrasing. That it's, like, too hard to. So
Have they ever seen Pixar movies? Maybe.
right, it's
seen
like
women? I don't know.
like blatantly ridiculous, but, like, just broaden the ideas of, like, what could be an attractive character, and that not everybody needs to be attractive anyway. For even my work, I want to have, like, I know my experience is being a young person, I want to have more, like, middle-aged and old women protagonists. They need to be representing.
Yeah, you know, we're in a good medium to do that too. Again, visuals. Like, we have, as an artist, you have the way to render anyone as beautiful as you want or as not. And, like, and I mean that, and I don't know, I always try to make sure that each of my characters just have something, like, some little spark that's like, okay, like, you could have, I don't know, something that seems attractive just that is in virtue of their expressions and their character.
Yeah, totally. We're our own casting directors, so we can use that for, like, social good.
Yeah. I think a good thing about comics is that you can also kind of show something that's, if you're, like, very interested in a certain type of beauty, you can kind of sell it to other people. I like Smut Peddler is a really good, like, feminist friendly porn anthology. of comics. And one thing I really liked about it was that it's very diverse body types, and you can tell like this person really likes like super muscly chicks, and like they like, but you read it and you're like, I get it, because like they drew like the parts that they find really attractive. And so like I think that comics more than movies and books can sort of really sell you on like different body types and like different identities.
Right.
Yeah. And like for someone to take an opinion, like, yeah, I like muscly chicks. Let's
Yeah,
make them look
yeah.
great. You're like, cool. I'm down with seeing your perspective
Yeah,
of doing
yeah.
that. It's a lot harder, and I think in other mediums.
Well, I mean, every time you pick up a comic, it's like you're really devoting some amount of time into the, you know, you're invited into the artist's head a little bit.
Right.
So that definitely is different compared to other, you know, like movies, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, things like that. So.
Yeah, or you have to work a lot harder to put that kind of stylization in a
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
And that's, it seems to me that that's what can create change. If you can bring the reader into your head
Yeah.
and your goals, you see things a certain way, you're seeing a future that you want, you know, that is transformative. As like you say, more, there are filmmakers who do wonderful things with that, but it's so hands-on for the artist to be able to create sort of a vision of what they want in society. I meant to mention earlier one thing about the genre comics. I should have thought of this as an English major, but you know, sci-fi and horror and those genres have traditionally been used to introduce social change to people who wouldn't have accepted it, to go under the radar, you know, of dominating powers or whatever. And comics have a subversive history too, you know, of introducing things that couldn't get by, because in some ways they can be done cheaply if they have to be, you know, and you can't stop them. And the internet is very good at that too, right? So. It's like it's very hard to stop a message once you try to get it out.
Right.
With comics, which is amazing.
Yeah, unlike film, you don't have to have a whole coalition who's working towards your vision. It can just be like, this is what I see, and that's pretty special.
It's very unfiltered. It's just exactly what you can see.
And the thing that really got me interested in comics is that I could just go have a photocopier, boop, 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 here you go.
Right.
You know, you can distribute it so cheaply.
You don't need that much space. I mean,
Don't
when I
need
moved
much
to New York, I was
space.
like, this is the new art form. And I'm not going to paint because I will breathe in my fumes. So, yeah. Very direct.
Okay, shall we want to be part of the conversation? Ask some questions and we'll talk to you all. Yeah.
Basically, I wanted to talk about what Molly and Hazel were talking about. I basically agree with both of them, like combined the idea that I agree with expanding the diversities and just having more, but then at the same time, actually what they were talking about were almost different aspects of female characters, because what Molly was talking about is actually almost internal, like you want more diversity in female characters or protagonists, and the diversity we want is like within themselves, is like their personality and the way they make choices. And what we don't want is this external factor that Hazel was talking about, of her being a prize or like an object of any sort, and that we want to introduce characters that can be feminine, can be flawed, and can have weaknesses. And I feel like right now the problem is that because there are so few female characters, each and every single one is being judged so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yep.
has a checklist, like, it'll be like, she's too strong and there's no emotion, or
Yeah.
she's not strong enough, she's so weak, she relies on others, so it's a flawed female
Yeah.
character, and
Yeah.
the problem is that there's not enough so that we can just look at them as characters instead of female characters.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas with men, we're just like, wow, he's so flawed and perfect, and it's not because he's a man.
I think it's the same with other minorities too.
Yeah.
Like I have there's like a lesbian character in my webcomic, and somebody wrote to me and was like you're like falling into this trope where like the lesbian gets like dismembered or something. I was like, it's not like, she's not like the lesbian. I didn't know that was a trope, first of all. I don't know, but like also like she's not the lesbian. Like she's like many things.
Right.
One of the things she is lesbian, but it's like it's sort of offensive to kind of like point at people's characters and say that's the woman, that's the lesbian, that's the black person. Like it's like
I blame the real world.
Real world. Nice.
You know, and maybe it's somebody who's not you know, open to a lot of things. Or maybe it's somebody who's just so starved for a character like that they're just like, you need to be everything.
Yeah.
Which is not good either. I mean, it's a bad place to be. But, yeah, definitely.
Which is why just in general across the board for like race, gender, sexuality, there just needs to be more representation so it all becomes, we're looking at the character, not
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we have so many, there's so many strong female characters right now, but they're so strong, like a guy hits on them and they like break his teeth, and like that's like pretty crazy. Like most people wouldn't do that. And so it's like that's like their one character trait is that they're so strong and tough and badass, but like they like it would just be so like I would love to see like a female character who's like Sherlock Holmes or something. Like that would be like brilliant or strange or crazy, like
Yeah.
yeah.
They sort of sanitized of flaws or have too many. Yeah. It's kind of very wide gap there.
Yeah.
You know, especially one thing that I wish I saw a little bit more is like sexual characters. Like, you know, because you can have a woman who wants to, I don't know, be sexy, do sexual things, and like it's hard because it's very hard to put that in. I don't know if I've seen a lot of good examples. Like, actually, the thing I'm thinking of right now is Tank Girl, which is, of course, written by guys. But it is good. And she's, like, sexual, real sexual, but, like, it doesn't, I don't know. They have I enjoy that they wanted to portray that character, and I don't think they're necessarily demeaning to her. I mean, she's strong in so many other ways, and, you know, to have fun with it. That whole comic's all about, like, whatever, you know, this is scuzzy and gross and we'll just do whatever. And that's cool. Like, and I think sometimes people are a little bit afraid to touch that subject.
Right. Yeah.
Because it could backfire on
Yeah, because it could backfire. Because that's going to, I mean, if you're having a too strong of a female character, like, what's going to happen when you have one who's like, I want to drink and have sex? It's like, oh, she's a, you know, there's just a million criticisms there.
Yeah,
as opposed to
social
just
baggage there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Brubaker is playing with that idea in Velvet right now, where the main character is basically like based on Moneypenny, and it's about the secret agents around her. I've only read half of the first issue, but I was enjoying it.
I was talking to my boss, Rich Johnson, at Bleeding Cool about it because he was obsessed with the first issue, and he really, really loved it. It's beautiful. It's like, you know, it's like a 70s spy film rendered beautifully, and he said, pointed out something I hadn't really thought of. I know it's supposed to be in Moneypenny. What he said is she's doing everything that James Bond does, and are we going to judge her for that? We don't judge him for that. Like, his behavior is so amoral in the stuff that he does. So it really
Lots of
reframes
people
it.
judge him for that.
Yeah, I feel like I
But
do.
they also, like, love him, you know.
Right.
And so it's like, it does,
Dating that woman.
it highlights, like, it's going to bring out people's reaction to gender, that.
Sure.
So what did you think of the comic, did you?
Well, like I said, I only read the first half.
Yeah.
Of the first issue, and I'm enjoying it. I think it's playing nicely.
I mean, it sold out like crazy.
Oh,
So
it did.
it
Oh, maybe
did?
I have like a second printing.
No, I mean it's done very well.
Yeah.
So I haven't read a lot of reviews of it to see what people are saying about how gender's presented, but it could be interesting.
I like to just sort of feel how a comic is playing, you know, or a character's playing off of myself rather than like necessarily putting it in a larger context, or if it's a trope, or like if it plays well for me personally and like my own experiences, then maybe I want to double check myself to see if it's something I'm just familiar with and I'm just like reaching for that again, or whether it's actually something that feels fresh, or why something feels fresh.
Actually, I have a question that built on that. I think that's an issue with genre in general, is it is all about these old tropes. I mean, most of sci-fi, I mean, and I consider superheroes a genre completely, so I was surprised to hear that not considered that way up there. But to me, that is, you can't get more genre than superheroes. James Bond is a genre, like and we return to them for comfort. We know what we're going to get. So when you want to do new work in a genre, you either have to choose to follow it or to subvert it, or maybe not. Maybe there's a third path that's not overtly one of those two, so if anyone has anything to say about that. And then that also relates to, I felt this tension towards the roundup statements you were making, that some of you want to see comics reaching a wider audience. You want everyone to read comics. But if you look at in other media what's popular, most of it is awful. Like, the books that really sell well are not necessarily the good ones. And the comics that cross over to non-comics audience, it's this very narrow niche of, like, literary fiction or memoir. And nothing wrong with that, but it's still, like, it's a pretty narrow thing. So it's like, do you really want the 50 Shades of Grey and the Dan Brown, because that's what's popular in books. And if you look at, again, same with movies. So, but those are definitely genre.
Okay. Well, I mean, because I'm a really big proponent of lots of everything, and I mean, I don't think, because yeah, there is a lot of awful literature and awful movies and everything. I can't argue with that, but I don't think I have the right to say, like, this is, you know, this stuff is okay to exist and this, you know, shouldn't exist. I mean, I do think, you know, even if there's stuff that I don't necessarily like and I think is drivel, it still has a right to be. And so and you know, and I'm trying to think of how to word it. It's like, the more people are aware that comics exist, the more likely, even if you have a niche comic that isn't going to be a blockbuster 50 Shades of Grey kind of comic, there's still going to be, you're able to tap into the niche audience so much easier. So I'm still a proponent of just, you know, getting it out there as much as possible. Though, I mean, I will admit that I will definitely complain, you know, whenever if this ever does happen, I will definitely complain about the 50 Shades of Grey of comics. That's great.
In reference to the sort of genre tropes, I mean, that's a huge thing. I think personally, the way I do it is it's a lot of research, because there's things you can pick and choose. Really, that's my approach. Yeah. It's very personal. So it's like, you know, film noir. There's a lot of slapping, so much slapping, not just women, men slapping. It's just like, okay, so less slapping, but I still want dark, moody. I still want
instead.
Right, yeah, smoking. But you know, and I still want, maybe I still even want like a sexy dame, like, but you know, it's got to be in a different context, and that's sort of, I pick and choose.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as a creator, I don't owe it to anyone else to, like, I mean, I want to present something that I find, like, morally appropriate, but I don't have to, like, follow anyone's idea of what noir is. I can pick and choose and go shopping, like,
right.
You know.
And I think that genre is rarely about a specific, is rarely keyed to gender, even though we may, like, assume that it is. So I think that, like, noir, you may think, like, all right, you have to have, like, your male detective who's mysterious and then a sexy lady, but, like, it could just as easily be swapped. It's much more about the, like, classic archetypes of those roles of, like, the, like, sexy person who needs help and the mysterious strong person, and that can be anyone, and they can be anywhere.
Is it maybe easier to flip gender roles because you're using the rest of the genre as a...
I think so, and I think that also makes your comic much more relevant and much more interesting, and what would have been just a basic noir story becomes much more interesting and challenging and new. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's great.
Does anyone else have a thing?
Well, I have a question kind of building off of that. Would you guys ever think about maybe wanting your books to literally be, like, when it comes to genre comics, you said before, you know, comics is the medium, genre is whatever you make it. Would you ever want your books to actually be sold with novels within the same genre? Because I know when Vertigo tried to have their Minx line, which for anyone who isn't aware, that was meant for, you know, young teen girls. It was like teen dramas, absolutely no super powers or magic whatsoever. You know, my favorite thing that Shelley Bond has ever said was like, yeah, it wasn't successful, it didn't sell, because they kept putting my damn books next to, like, Hellboy. And, like, a 13-year-old girl who never read a comic book from the suburbs isn't going to make her mom drive her to, you know, a comic book store filled with men, where she's probably, like, New York, we're very blessed to have female-friendly stores, but where I come from, I got bullied at my comic book store for years. So in order to open up to a female audience, would you guys actually kind of push to have your comics sold with novels in the same genre?
Yeah. You know, I think there would obviously be some confusion at first, but that's cool. Like, I would be really interested to see how that works, and you know,
I think the ideal bookstore of the future will, like, sort of shelved by genre, not by books and comics.
Yeah, that was Will Eisner's will. That was Will Eisner's desire.
Oh yeah.
His graphic novels. In his last trip to a Barnes and Noble's, his last signing, he walked over and looked at some like novels and said, "My book should be right there." Yeah, that was his
Did not
thing.
live to see it.
Yeah. I mean, and they said, "Isn't it great? Over here we have a graphic novel section, and there are your books." And he said, "No, I want my books over there." And it's kind of controversial, but that was one of the last things that he said. People debated it a lot.
That's cool.
I think that would be a really good, like, way if like let's say like Neil Gaiman, he writes a lot of novels that's really popular. So why don't you put like Sandman right next to like Neverwhere or you know, like it just makes sense that way. But I don't know why in this country it's not happening yet, you know.
If I can interject, Michael, the owner, is trying to do that here. We have.
Yeah, I noticed.
He's got Essex County and Savannah Plaza over there, so it's an experiment, but they're there. And then we got the superhero stuff over here.
But that's just
This is just the superhero stuff. Yeah. So.
So maybe that's the transition that Laura's saying could be that confusing period. Maybe it's to do both, and actually that was a suggestion people were making with libraries, that they start doing both because they can, though it would be confusing
the public library does some.
Yeah.
A little bit. It's like the fiction and nonfiction thing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you actually have to go to a different floor for the nonfiction comics versus the fiction comics. Like that's pretty brilliant.
Make people work a little.
I've actually seen a little bit of overlap, but I don't know how or where they started from. But I guess they just start from things that begin to make more sense to your like regular audience. Like I was just buying a book for class, and I was looking for something by Joe Sacco. I went to the comic book section. I was like, there are Joe Sacco books there. I was like, where's Safe Area Garage? And I asked, and it's over next to other books, like nonfiction novels, and it's put over there. So they kind of do both, but where. So to them, it makes sense that it's a very heavily journalist-like comic or graphic novel with lots of words would go here. And there's like, it's starting to bleed over.
I think it happens with nonfiction first.
Yeah.
Like, I know Logic Comics is like filed in the library as a math book.
Right.
Where was that?
Barnesville, like in Union Square. So.
Great.
Kimbia.
Oh, so kind of related to what we were talking about before about, I guess, criticism of women, like, you know, this one's, like, not strong enough, this one is, like, too strong. And costuming also, they're kind of talking about, like, how you want to design your women and other things like that. Like, as female creators and, like, I guess as, like, creators of anything that's, like, socially conscious, how do you deal with the pressure of the fact that inevitably almost everything that you do is in a way wrong? And also in a way, like, completely right. But, like, you know, like, for every character that you have, like, you know, you have a lesbian character, it's like, well, where's my bisexual character? Why isn't he there? Why isn't he there? There's so many bisexual women who are represented. Where are the bisexual men? Like, how do you deal with that?
You can't do anything to please everyone. You have to do what makes you happy. You know? Like, our profession is probably one of the most selfish profession, because we can basically make anything on our own. We don't need anyone else's help. So we are telling stories that we want to read, and it cannot have like every different archetypal, you know, different race and different, you know, sexual orientation. Like, it's just not possible. So
I guess that, like, I feel that, like, because when I do my own creations and stuff like that, but then I'm like, but that's the argument that all the white guys use. And so, like,
we're just doing what's interesting to us.
Right. So, like, I don't,
interesting to us.
and, like, not that I think that you can do any, like, that you could possibly have, like, every single iteration. It's just that I feel like, I guess, there's always this pressure to, like, have, like, this story to tell, and I don't know, like, if you guys feel that at all. Maybe it's just...
I definitely think about that a lot, and I sort of always imagine someone with like a tally sheet of like every single thing that you could be, being like check, not check. But I think that the solution is just to have a lot of diversity in various ways, and also to recognize when you're dreaming of a new character and you sort of have the archetype, to recognize that the archetype is probably a white man, and it doesn't have to be. I think, like, the webcomic I'm working on, I want to introduce like this kooky, like, old character, and I obviously first I thought like a kooky old man, and I was like, it could be a kooky old woman so easily, like, and that makes it more interesting. So I think, like, just like taking a second to examine your own prejudices that have been built up by just all the media that you consume, and sort of examining that there's not as many ground rules for like what an archetype or a genre is than you might think. So
and I sort of, there's a certain amount of things that you have to be at peace with. I mean, speaking of like the racial perspective of the whole thing, so my previous comic, I mean, I got flack from both sides. When I say both sides, I mean it's sort of like the white side and the Arab side of readers. Specifically, I mean, okay, because there's one particular story that I talk about my family, and they were, you know, I have a pretty sexist family, actually. And so, you know, so I talk about this, I address it in the comic, and I've actually had Arab people come to me saying, like, why are you talking about this in the comic? You're going to make us all sound like that. And it's like, I didn't make the comic for it to be like, I'm the representative of all Arab people, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm one of the only people who did that, who are doing comics about this, so it's like I kind of have to accept a bit that that's what the comic is going to come off as. It's going to be like this representative. But at the same time, I don't want to sugarcoat things. I don't want to say that because this is my family dynamic. This is, you know, what's going on. Not all Arab families are like that, but mine is. So, you know, there's a certain amount of, you know, again, broadening the fan base and broadening the amount. I really think that's a lot of the solution to the problems. But I think when there's more of these kind of comics out there, it won't be so much of a problem. But for now, it's just something that I feel like it has to just be, you know, taken as part of the territory a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and I loved Hookah Girl and other stories. And part of it was just that, like, yeah, there were parts that, you know, you navigated the line. And I think that's, again, praise in comics. Like, you can do that. There's so many pages, and you could, like, kind of, you know, if I thought, because I don't know much about that your perspective. So I was really interested. And, like, you know, if there were... I sort of was sensing like two binary things, but you know, you're going back and forth between them and able to sort of not have to pick a side and not have, you know, show where there are conflicts and show where there's just two things parallel to one another that are functioning. And yeah, I don't know.
Thank you.
So I just
That's exactly what I wanted. Thank you.
But yeah, and
Thank
that
you.
like I was very pleased that you didn't have to just pick a side, you know, and that you could go between those things.
Yeah, I think like not the idea of like not having your characters stand in as a representative for all of whatever they are is like, I think it's just so much more, it's such a more interesting character also to have them stand in for a philosophy or to have them be defined by their actions or their circumstances than just like one factor of them. Yeah.
But do you think that that's partly, you know, the patriarchy, and it's not necessarily a male patriarchy anymore, but just the white patriarchy or the dominant patriarchy that puts this guilt on all of us who don't see that as the way of life, that now we have this guilt because we don't have every single character represented, we don't have every single ethnic diversity represented. It's not our weight to bear.
Right.
You know, and I feel like that just walking down the street sometimes, it's like that's the patriarchy making me feel this way. I don't have to accept that. I don't have to be, like I said, everything. I don't have to have the tally sheet. I love that. You know. Do you feel that way? That it's, you either choose it or you don't, and it's the diversity of the voice, your point of view is going to smash that patriarchy.
Yeah, and I kind of think it's also in especially genre comics, it's a little bit of a numbers game where it's just like the more characters we have who are outside of the normal template, the easier it will be to have more characters like that.
But I think what you said about sort of the assessment is brilliant because it's a part of making comics that's important. It's just to like sort of see where the ground's at and like what you need to do. But you know, there's some stories that I know from my perspective I'm not comfortable telling. But for example, there's this call for this anthology called Beyond, and they're basically calling for submissions, and it's a sci-fi anthology with a queer bent. And I was like, can I do a story like that? Like, you know, I certainly have different types of queer characters in my stories, but can I, like, do I have this perspective? And I ended up being like, no. So I called up my friend who's a writer, and I was like, you can do this better than me. Let's talk about it. But, but like, you know, and I feel like I have just as much right to represent a character in my story, but like how I do it and in what context, and if, you know, is sort of based on what I feel comfortable with. So like, you know, like I said, I have queer characters in my stories, but I haven't written a queer sci-fi. It's just like that for some reason was sort of out of my jurisdiction, and I didn't think I'd be able to authentically do that. And I didn't, you know, maybe there's some characters that I want to know more about, so I'll research and see if I can use that voice, but not always. And so you have to sort of judge where it's appropriate and just what you feel comfortable with, and if it's gonna help you grow, and if it's gonna be interesting.
That's why I like fantasy and sci-fi also, because you can approach these issues without pinning it on a specific demographic, so there can be like, there's like an elf minority and the humans are like raiding on them, and that's like, then that can apply to anything kind of, and so you can really like show like a story about a minority, but you don't have to like be like, I'm associating it with this ethnic group, I'm telling the story of this group that I'm like not a part of.
Takes the burden of the political correctness, sort of.
Yeah.
Or the specificness.
You can draw elves.
I feel like the visual scape in American comics is largely white though, and like being mixed and just having friends, like I'm from New York, and like, you know, I have friends of all mixes and all shades, and like that's still something that comes up time and again, and like because it's across genres, like I think, or across mediums and genres, like that is still incredibly relevant to me. And in the same way we're talking about gender, you're like, artists get to make choices, and producers and like reporters, like people get to choose what's seen. And so like something that was raised earlier was the Comics Journal, like not including female creators, and I'm gonna say probably most of the creators are white. Like, how can we influence each other, influence ourselves to like keep looking? And I know we're talking about like searching for different types of characters and just like making sure that that has relevance, but being conscious of representing more people or creating a more diverse scape across the board is important to me as a reader, or as a consumer.
Do you mean creators or content, or both?
Both. So it's like your content as a creator, because like the way it looks right now, like in the future, 500 years from now, like everybody's white, and there's like maybe a couple of like enclaves of who are survived, maybe, you know, and they're spread across the galaxy.
That's very true.
But like, yeah, so that's like something that's important to me, and I feel that challenge exists in like across the board in comics. Like all creators are having this like people are navigating the social, economic, historic, like the scape of our existence as humans, like in the way that we've can like remembered how time works, or remembered our relationships, and like I hope that we keep challenging those ideas.
I mean, it's about throwing your support to things that you want to see or learn more about, or just reaching out to people. Like, you know, if you don't know, you call up somebody who does, and not that they're the representative of this one type of person, but they're gonna have a better, like my friend was gonna have much better insights onto writing that, because he writes genre and he's transgender, and I'm like, great, this is perfect, let's talk. But you know, and throwing support. I was at a comics festival, and this woman, I forget her name now, she runs the Albuquerque Zine Fest. She had this great zine that was about the first female black aviator, and I was like, this is amazing, and I was so excited just to see something new like that, and and excited to support her in that way and learn more about it. And I don't know, it seems like a natural inclination. You're like, that is new and interesting, and I want to read it, and I've never heard this before.
Like the first autobiographical comic in this country was put out in like 1913 by a Japanese immigrant to the West Coast, you know, like that, and it's serialized, it's amazing. It's called For Immigrants manga, and it's been translated, and I think it was ultimately published in the 30s. I probably have those dates a little shifted, but and like I don't feel like that's common knowledge.
No, thank you.
It was published when I was in college, like, you know, and I was like, holy shit. You know, or like newspapers were segregated, and so we had segregated syndications of cartoonists, but there isn't like a knowledge. You know, there was a dude who had a listing online, I forget his name right off the top of my head now, but it's down now, but he had like black comic strip characters and like black creators, and like that knowledge is not something that is put forth in like the canon of comics in this country,
right?
Or like reading Trina Robbins, women cartoonists. Like she's talking about how there were gainfully employed female cartoonists, albeit not tons out of the men, but like there were like substantial creators, and then that memory that like that you could hire female women to cartoon like faded by the 40s or something. Like it's just like this odd, and then like it becomes washed away, and there's fewer and fewer women in mainstream comics. And mainstream comics used to be diverse also, even though it was like, even if it was only going to run for 4 issues, like people were trying things left and right, and like I feel like this time has come again.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's right on. It's
A weird side note to that, just for your information, maybe you already know, but the Library of Congress has become instrumental in trying to gather these things that we haven't heard of or seen. We're getting stuff from other countries that was produced here that has survived in other countries.
That's awesome.
Stuff that was happening during the world wars and stuff is starting to go into their collections. Now I know there's still a lot to be done because they only started collecting minis 2 years ago.
Right.
But people are donating, and I've had 2 friends who went there and saw stuff that blew their minds because they had no idea it existed. And it's always like this transcendent experience for cartoonists to go there. You know, you can go and do these free tours, and you can look at stuff. You can make appointments to see certain stuff. And I think that, you know, at least it's being put somewhere where people can access it and see. Because we need a lot more. I think we need more scholarship too.
Absolutely.
Comic scholar. So I agree. I mean, a lot of this. I actually think the creation issues should come first. But I think the scholarship will help inform people to find things.
Yes.
And word of mouth, like you all are telling each other about cool stuff. But actually, I was going to ask you all a related question. What advice would you give to readers for helping support change? Because I think a lot of people want to do things, but they're not sure what to do.
I think like go to indie comic conventions, buy things, donate to your favorite webcomics, and donate to their Kickstarters, and tell everyone you know about them. I think it's like word of mouth, and then like there's so much content that's being given away for free right now. And when those people ask for money, like know that you consumed that content and enjoyed it, and that like you got it for free, and give them what you think they deserve. Like, and just sharing. Like I think social media is so instrumental in discovering new comics. So like,
that's true.
I mean, everything you're talking about is just giving it weight. Like it was somebody's. It's a product that has meaning and it has value. So treating it that way.
Yes.
And you know, telling people how you felt about it.
Yeah, and I think that there's more chance than ever for readers to really choose exactly what they like. I think Kickstarter is amazing for comics, and like you can really directly say like, I want these kind of stories in the world. Like, here's my money. Go make them, and that's cool. It's like there's no like, I mean, there are big editors, but there's also like hundreds of tiny editors who fund Kickstarters, and that's awesome.
You just browse the comics section on Kickstarter?
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, it's just like the webcomics that I know do Kickstarters. I like if you follow comics people on Twitter, you'll constantly be bombarded about everyone's Kickstarters.
You know, you go to a festival and you find all these little handouts, and you're like, oh, this is a great Kickstarter for an anthology. I don't know. If you're looking for it, you will find it. We try so hard to put our stuff on so many different forms of social media. It is out there.
No, I think that's the message of the internet. Like, it's there for you. Or
shameless plug, but relevant. if you look at Bleeding Cool on a Saturday or Sunday, we run pretty much 24 hours of Kickstarters on Saturday and Sunday.
Oh, cool.
So, and they're often, we allow the creators to write in their own words, and we put up their things. Yeah, it's great. We're trying.
I agree with definitely putting your money behind what you want to see, and I think also in addition to that, or even if you can't do that, like there's so many ways to contact creators now. Like you could meet them at a convention or email them or whatever, and like just telling people that you like what they're doing and their work is meaningful to you, you know, is gonna, sometimes it's not gonna be that financially rewarding, but that's gonna make people feel awesome and want to make more stuff.
And you'd be surprised how many people want to nitpick or tell you, like, you know, my first hate mail, it's like, all right, but then after that, it's like, oh, this is not fun. So like balancing that, like, please.
More questions? Yeah.
For all of you, do you think you came to comics with your social consciousness and applied your consciousness to comics, or was your consciousness formed by comics?
It's so hard to say because I feel like, I mean, when I first started really getting into comics, I did not have the same social consciousness that I do now, for sure. I mean, I was drawing like anthropomorphic people who went on adventures in a fantasy setting. Like that was my first comic that I ever drew. So I feel like they're kind of one and the same, because like I've been so into comics for so long that I feel like my consciousness has just kind of grown with me with both things. So I can't really separate it.
Can you name any influential comics that were influential on forming your?
Well, like I said, Naji Ali, who's the Pasanin guy. Joe Sacco, his work's amazing. Linda Berry. I like, she's like, oh my god, I mean, I love her work so much. And you know, and later on I learned more about like Alison Bechdel, who's, you know, also completely phenomenal. But even like Mouse. But that, I mean, because I mean, back in the day, that's the one comic that everyone was like, oh, comics can be lots of things. Look at Mouse. You know, that was like the one example at the time. So I mean, I feel like, I mean, in a way, I feel like most you know, genre cartoonists, indie cartoonists are kind of influenced by Mouse, at least in that way, that it was sort of like the forefront of the whole thing before it got really big. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience, but I definitely find myself like constantly challenged by sort of even like more socially progressive comics, and kind of like seeing like where the bar is and like how I want to rise to meet it. So that's like very inspiring. I think, and Persepolis specifically was a comic that really challenged me, and I think the reason it did was challenged me in a good way, because it's a comic, and because of the way it's drawn, the people are very simple, they're black and white, and there's sort of no, even though it's about a very specific time and place, there's no like sort of visual cue that it's like the other. So I found that was sort of the first, I read it in high school, I was very much like, you just go right into the characters, because they could be anyone, they're so simple, and like really experience this like very specific situation. So I think comics have a lot of potential for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I've had, you know, social change wise, I feel like I came to comics with it, but sort of what you were just saying is that what's expanded so much since I've been making comics and reading comics is just how the visual language to tell these stories and how that changes the tone so much. I mean, since I've been reading comics, my visual tastes have expanded so much. There's so many things that when I first started, I was like, ugly. And now I'm like, brilliant, you know? And it's not just like the aesthetic, but also how that is informing the story. I mean, when I finally understood that sort of connection between, you know, this is like Greenbergian, but like the form fitting the story and like how that translates in comics, it's just mind-blowing. And I feel like that's, you know, you're evaluating how you like a comic on so many levels, and that relationship, you know, has grown. And because of that, it's opened me up to different types of stories that I wouldn't have. Right. Like, yeah. I would just, yeah. So many things that I just would have never touched, and now I'm like, oh, this is telling me something in a totally different way.
I think when I first started reading comics, I was too young to even think about what socialism, like social context at all. You know, I was like 7 years old or something. But I think right now, because comic is like one of my favorite medium to get any kind of information. Like if I have a desire to learn about something, I'll reach out to like comic about it. You know, so that way I can observe new information quicker, more enjoyable way. So I guess in that way I'm much more influenced by comics now than when I was young.
I think for me how comics relate to social consciousness is I'm a lot more familiar with like reality based work than genre comics, and I've read a lot of autobio, but yeah, I think it's about the window into someone else's life that for me there's just like it is more accessible than prose. I feel like there's not as much of a barrier. So I think intrinsically by experiencing, I mean, who knows whether you're ever experiencing what someone else has experienced. It's impossible to say, but experiencing somebody else's perspective on like what certain gender is like, or what it was like to be abused or grow up in a certain country or be mentally ill. I think that that potential to empathize with all kinds of different people has expanded my social consciousness, and then I'm trying to put that forward into what I'm making by letting people either empathize with me with autobio stuff or with different characters.
Wow. Shall we, just to make sure we get this in before anyone needs to leave, could you all just remind people what the works are that you're working on right now so they can find them, like briefly, like what the titles and where they're located and stuff like that? Is that okay?
Yeah. I'm working on Tales of the Night Watchman with Dave Kelly over there. We also do So What Press, so you can find all that at sowhatpress.com. And
at this bookstore too.
And at this bookstore, yeah, and any comic shop basically in New York.
Okay, so my two comics are, I have The Hookah Girl and Other True Stories. I have 2 books of that. And I have the first issue, very thin issue, of A Voyage to Panjikat, which is the historical fiction. If you, my website is mtobuy.com. You can find it on there. If you need a business card, I do have business cards, so you can just come get one.
Everyone make sure you grab a zine on the back. It's got everybody's bio,
That's really
website, contacts.
That'll answer the question.
It's in color. It's
there you
free.
go.
What?
So, yeah, make sure you get one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, I will also give you my business card. I do a socially conscious superhero webcomic called Strong Female Protagonist and a like hardcore fantasy webcomic called journeycomic.com.
Okay, I'm working on this story called The Dress. It's gonna be right on this mark. So it's about a young woman in New York who finds this dress that's basically haunted from like the 50s. It's a vintage dress that she finds in someone else's like dumpster, and she wears it and she gets haunted by it. So it's like a mystery, kind of erotic thriller that I'm working on, which I'm gonna put online first, and then hopefully maybe by Kickstarter or something I can actually print it out. And also I'm writing a memoir about my move from Seoul to Alabama and back in 1995. And I didn't know we were moving here. My mom lied to me that. So yeah, that was pretty traumatic, and I think that will be a very interesting viewpoint to tell a story about, because there's a lot of immigrant kids in this country and there are not that many comics about it. So that's what I'm working on right now. And you can find all about it on my website. It's robin.megaten, megaten.net.
What I'm working on right now is related to this comic, If This Be Sin, about the cross-dressing blues singer Gladys Bentley. I just got a Queer Press grant for it recently, which is super exciting, so that's going to let me expand this into a collection of different short comics that are related to queer women and blues music and how they express themselves through that. I'm going to be printing that next spring, but in the meantime, a lot of it's online. newlevant.com, it's just my last name, has everything. This isn't, I don't know how this ties into gender, but I'm also doing weekly concert review comics on my site. And yeah, that has my stuff and all of my mini comics, which you could order, or I'm at conventions.
Who's gonna
Perfect
be,
tie-in.
Yes, yeah.
I was just going to ask, are any of you at Comic Arts Brooklyn this weekend?
Yes. And I think a good amount of us brought comics to sell here as well. Even though they're not, we'll bring them out.
Get them
when we're
before
done.
they sell out.
So, yeah, we'll have those too. And a couple others that I didn't mention anyway.
I'm sorry. Was there something?
No, I was going to ask
the
exact same question. Yeah.
Because I didn't know who was tabling and who was, but I hope to see you all there. Do we need to wrap up or?
Let's wrap up.
Okay. We've been talking for like 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty well. But yeah, we can hang out for a little while. And
Sell
like
some
I
books,
said,
sign some books.
some books. Yeah. I don't know. Michael had to run off, so I can't sell you anything from the bookstore, but we can sell you stuff. Oh, you can sell your book. Okay, cool.
Okay.
I'll send you over. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you so
buy
much.
anything you want. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
guys so much.
Thank you.
I think we solved all the gender issues in comics.
Yeah.
Yes, we
done.
solved all of it.
Yeah.
All of it. All of
It's
it.
solved.
Yeah, or if you guys are just interested in perusing books, come on.
Yeah.
They're amazing.
Oh my god.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
I can do anything.
Oh, really? That was amazing.
That was fun.
No, it was not wonderful, but you were wonderful.
We're not